What's up, geeks and gamers? It's Odin coming back to the box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse getting $200+ million internationally. And let's just say this film has blown The Little Mermaid out of the water in many different aspects and in many different ways, and even within communist China. And it's interesting in that regards because even though, as I consistently always do, calling out studios that do deals with China, it is interesting how the narrative that was being propped up about why The Little Mermaid was failing was because people were racist. And yet, that doesn't seem to be the case for Miles Morales, which is, again, quite an interesting dichotomy there, and a little bit inconsistent, and also kind of just blows all of the narratives that were being strung along by all the mainstream media outlets about why that film had been failing. And guess what? We do have updated numbers on the Little Mermaid movie, and yeah, this movie is set to be a pretty massive flop. How much of a flop will depend on various things, but with more and more films set to come out over the course of the summer, yeah, this movie not set to do all that well. So let's go ahead and dive into these numbers. So first off, as you can see from Deadline, Nancy over at Deadline talking about how $209 million was made globally by Across the Spider-Verse. And even though I thought the film was, again, it was fine, it was okay. Definitely had some really good moments, also had some very long and boring moments as well. It's very clear that a lot of audiences are resonating with this movie, and this movie is making quite a bit of money at this point and is actually very close even to its own break even. And I suspect by next weekend, in fact, this film will already be profitable. We cannot say the same thing for The Little Mermaid, though. This film only getting to $326 million after 2 weeks. And if you look at that split between the domestic and international, that is the biggest problem that this film has. The domestic box office is fine. It's okay. It's definitely not anything to write home about, but the international box office is absolutely atrocious. For those wondering, because remember, Deadline and other places were putting this up against 2019's Aladdin. Interestingly enough, though, they were ignoring the fact that, hey, the value of the dollar has actually changed quite a bit in addition to the average ticket price. And if you actually compare these movies, if other than the actual opening day numbers, The Little Mermaid has nothing on the original, or rather has nothing on the live action Aladdin from 2019. And as you can see, at the same point in its release, the live action Aladdin had $211 million, whereas now The Little Mermaid is at 186. So quite a bit of difference there, even though the false narrative was being run with that The Little Mermaid had outperformed Aladdin. Again, that was ignoring some pretty important facts about ticket prices and inflation. But what does this tell us? It tells us Little Mermaid is in a lot of trouble because, yeah, the domestic market is definitely showing up to a certain degree, but is not going to be able to make up for what it's lacking internationally, and that's why I suspect the film will probably end up being yet another Disney flop. And with Elemental set to come out to incredibly low box office numbers, yeah, it looks like it's going to be flops galore for pretty much everything coming out from Disney, especially when it comes to their kids or family content. And I think a lot of that stems from how they've gotten involved in not only direct politics in the state of Florida, but also ignited politics in their films and various other things coming out about that great company that is Disney. We also had a new film in The Boogeyman opening up to $28 million, which is fine. It's okay. However, based off of the budget on the movie, it may not be enough. We'll have to wait and see what the film's numbers are next weekend. Guardians of the Galaxy, as projected, has now surpassed the numbers very easily, I might add, of Thor: Love and Thunder, which capped out around $750 million. This film now at $780 million, and there's a decent chance it added another about $35 to $40 million worldwide this past weekend, which means as long as it continues to have these kinds of holds every single week, even in the midst of competition, $850 million is not out of the picture for this movie. So this movie is going to end somewhere between $800 and $900 million. And again, I think 850 is probably a good metric for where this film's endpoint might be. If it's a little under 850, I still think that's a win for this movie. But the reason why 850 would be significant is because that would put this film right alongside the film, a film like Wakanda Forever. And the big differences between these two films are obviously quite striking. Fast 10 is also a movie that is dropping off quite a bit. Again, it's done nothing domestically. This film is actually doing quite abysmally domestically. When a movie like this in Fast 10 is losing to a movie like that of The Little Mermaid, I think that tells you a little bit about, where American audiences are, where North American audiences are versus, especially the Asian market. As if you look at the international numbers, where's the biggest number? That is right, China, $124.5 million. And again, most of that going to the CCP. But $603 million is definitely not a terrible figure. But as I had projected earlier on with this film, I'm projecting it to still lose money. This film cost a crap ton of money, and it is not tracking well enough in those international markets for it to have a prayer of making that money back, especially when you remember that the studios only get a percentage of the box office figures and not the entire 100%. Super Mario Bros. Has officially crossed $1.3 billion as had been projected for a while. And again, it's going to end somewhere between 1.3 and 1.4 at this point. However, it's, again, pretty much made all the money that it's going to make in the various markets that it's in. About My Father has been and is a box office flop. And hey, kudos to you, Robert De Niro, for continuing to do movies. And it's sad that that guy has fallen to such a state. The Machine, which I've heard some mixed things about, also likely to be a box office flop. Kandahar, we don't have a budget on, but based off the projections that I have for this movie, probably a flop. And Evil Dead Rise also continuing to add to its overall profits. We go to the box office charting because we love to do charting here over at Geeks and Gamers. As you can see, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse at $208 million on a $100 million budget. It means that the movie's break-even point is roughly around $250 million. And because of that fact, it means at $208.6 million, film is only around $24.8 million in the red at this point. And that means that, again, by next weekend, very likely going to make its money back. The Boogeyman, as you can see, around $40.5 million in the red, so it still has a little ways to go. The Machine also has a ways to go and likely going to be a box office flop based on the projections. About My Father, also set to be an even bigger flop. But The Little Mermaid, as you can see, $94 million is the worst case scenario that this movie has, with the best case scenario being $17 million. Now, the only way it would get to that $17 million is if it doubles the amount of money it's made so far. Based on the kind of numbers that we're seeing, this film dropping around 60% from week 1 to week 2 domestically, and how this film is doing next to nothing internationally, there's no way Japan's going to come out and play for this movie to the degree it would need to make up for the losses that it's had in every other market. So that means I'm projecting that this movie, again based on historical standards, is going to end its theatrical run a best case scenario at $650 million, which that is a best case scenario, and that's just not going to happen. What is a much more likely scenario based on the numbers that we're seeing? Somewhere between $466 and $560 million. I would be very surprised to see this movie actually break $500 million. Is it possible? Again, historically, it is absolutely possible. Is that actually going to happen? I have a lot of doubts about that. But let's just say Little Mermaid, very likely going to be a box office flop based off of these numbers. Currently is around $178 million in the red. But again, some people's break-even point might even be higher for this movie. So not only is the chance of this film breaking even essentially non-existent, the chance of it losing quite a bit of money is essentially all but guaranteed. I would not be surprised to see this film lose somewhere between $50 and $100 million when everything is said and done, especially if reports about the budget and the marketing especially are actually true. And depending upon how much they actually get in return from this film, yeah, couldn't happen to a nicer company. But anyway, fireworks are going off in the background. I don't know if y'all can hear that, but of course y'all can probably hear the puppies who are quite upset. They do not like fireworks, so I'm gonna go ahead and take care of them. But what are y'all thoughts about this? Let me know in the comment section down below. If that's video, smash that like button on YouTube, and wherever it is you're watching, whatever is there, smash it. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, a blessed Trinity Sunday, and as always, God bless.